If something is falling apart on your walkthrough and you don't have the capital to replace it and repair it properly, I can tell you right now, you're not making it. You're not making it in the restaurant business at that location.
Welcome to Mastering Restaurant Revenue, turning restaurant dreams into significant profits. We're your host, Bruce Russo. He's the GOAT of restaurant design and build, having created nearly 600 money-making operations and earning a tower of national and regional awards in the process. And I'm Diane Armitage, 30 years leading a global marketing agency helping restaurants transform into profit machines. If you run a restaurant, you know margins are so tight and every decision matters. We're showing you how to maximize revenue from actual build-out to time and money-saving equipment, proper concepting and marketing, and the holy grail of them all, the guest experience. No fluff, no guesswork. This is a combined 75 years of proven strategies helping you create bigger revenue streams. Please like, comment, and share this to your industry peers. And let's get to it. Thank you for joining us again, and we're honored to have you here at Mastering Restaurant Revenue. We know that when you hit play on this episode, you probably fall into one of two camps. You're looking for experienced solutions for restaurant builds, renovations, marketing, and operations, or box two, you're a consumer out there who loves dining out, and you just can't believe it takes all these pieces to get that one great meal onto your table. Wouldn't you agree with that, Bruce?
Oh.
Yes. It's a lot of pieces.
A lot of work.
It's a lot of pieces. So today we thought we would do an episode called Things That Make You Go Hum. And we thought we would start with talking about some of our somewhat funny, somewhat horror stories that we've seen and experienced in the restaurant business. As we're looking at building restaurants, looking at second generation restaurants, looking at third generation restaurants. And the reason we're saying all of this and talking to you folks about this is because, a lot of times a restaurant operator doesn't really know to look for these things. And sometimes they'll be hiring people who don't really know how the restaurants actually operate. So before we got on this call, Bruce and I were talking about a situation that he dealt with just today about a contractor who was hired to work with him on a restaurant build, but the contractor has never developed restaurants, correct, Bruce? Correct. So they do like finish inside offices, that kind of thing. And so even when we say that it's very important to hire a design and build team that understands restaurants, we're going to start with what happens before you even get the slab poured with the restaurant. I'd love to have you tell this story, Bruce, about these contractors and the decisions they made about this particular restaurant space that's being built out on kind of dicey soil.
Yes. So in this particular instance, we know this area has expansive clay. Mm-hmm. And expansive clay, what does that mean? Well, when the water gets wet, it expands 5.5 times its size. So it's substantial. Okay, there's engineering that can be done to compensate for that. And it works. I mean, there's many buildings that have been built and designed to sit on that kind of soil. Well, in this particular case, the building is built and we're renovating and we're adding some structural elements. And we had a soil report done, and the geotech engineer specified that the pier depth is 37 feet deep.
And when you say pier, what are you referring to for the consumer?
Pier is basically we drill a hole into the ground, and in that geotech report, it tells us how deep the dirt is because they've done core samples. And their core samples tell them what the strata of the earth is and where we hit rock for bearing strata, what we call bearing strata. And in this particular case, it's not so much the load of the building that's the problem, it's the uplift. So when you get a rock strata, you want to drill into that rock. So when you pour the concrete pier as one continuous leg, the bottom third of that is embedded in the rock, which keeps the building from coming out of the ground.
Very wise choice.
I mean, trust me, it gets pretty intense. And, it's things like this that, when owners say, well, I got a friend's sister's husband, brother's cousin's brother's sister-in-law's husband that he knows how to do. He built a deck in his backyard. They have no idea the magnitude of what I just told you. Okay, in this particular case, nor does this. There was a decision made. We're not going to do 37-foot deep piers. We're going to go to 13-foot.
Okay, so the geo report was you've got to go 37 feet deep.
37 feet, embed 13 feet into rock. Yes. They decided to go 13 feet. Total pier depth 13 feet. And
does it even get to the rock strata at that point?
No, because the rock strata, top of rock strata in this particular core samples was at 26 feet. So long story short, they couldn't pass inspection because they were doing, they had steel made.
They decided to.
They didn't have 37-foot steel made. They had 13-foot steel made. And the inspector asked $1 million question, what are you guys doing here? And, good thing for the inspectors, because once the concrete is poured, we have no idea how deep they went.
Right, exactly. So when this happened, what was their decision for going from 27 feet to 13 feet?
Value engineering.
Value engineering. What a
They
perfect
took it upon
phrase.
themselves to value engineer to the process what they thought was the right thing to do. And
so in consumer terms, that's basically cutting corners. Correct. Interesting. So now, did they actually go through the process, or did they get stopped before they actually went through the process?
They got stopped.
Okay, good. So
it never happened.
Wow. Okay.
So then I came back. We had a meeting. We had a meeting with myself and the structural engineer, and it's like, okay, guys, I'll show you how we're going to value engineer this. So structural engineers build a safety factor into everything they engineer. And it's typically 30 to 50%. They're a safety factor. So in this particular case, I suggested we eliminate every other pier line. So I think there was 30 total. We ended up cutting 16 piers out of it. So what we did was we spaced the piers further apart and enlarged the steel that was going to rest on the piers. So at the end of the day, it's the same, just that there was less piers to be dropped. Yeah.
Wow. Okay. Well, that sounds like smart value engineering, not cutting corner value engineering.
Well, it was the proper engineering, because the structural engineer was there, and between his experience and my experience, I suggested, and I just asked a what if question: what if we eliminate every other pier?
Mm-hmm.
And he thought about it. He said, I could probably do that. And he started calculating. He goes, yeah, I can do that. I can enlarge the steel because we're increasing the span, so we have to do larger steel. And it was a considerable amount. It was almost $500,000 savings.
Wow. That's amazing. But still in the safety zone. Still very much in the safety zone, so to speak.
So the drawings took us a week to redo the drawings. The engineering was all done. We moved the staircase. We did a couple other odds and ends. And now they're back on now they're back on track.
So when we talk about the interior of restaurants, it seems like in many cases, especially in the kitchen, a lot of value engineering goes on that is not necessarily checked through all of the inspectors, but it's just done to cut corners, so to speak, and to kind of keep everything sort of, glued together with paper clips and Scotch tape.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
And now you say that, go ahead.
Yeah, we're going to start talking about a manufacturing plant that's not taken care of and not maintained properly.
Very good point. Right. And if you've missed our earlier episodes, when we talk about a restaurant being a manufacturing plant, I think this is a great phrase that Bruce has come up with. So I'll let you explain why a restaurant is a manufacturing plant in case somebody missed that episode in the past.
Okay. A restaurant is a manufacturing plant, big, small, doesn't matter what size they are. They get raw product in the back door. That something is done to that product in the kitchen or whatever facility it is, and finished product goes out on the table to the consumer. And that portion of the restaurant or whatever it may be, that's your manufacturing plant. That's where all the work is done. And it's a machine. That's the way I look at designing and building them. They're built as a machine to function with the people that function within it. And it all has to work together, the spacing, the reach, how they turn at this counter to that counter. And all that has to be considered for it to be done right. Now, when it's not maintained properly and we're not making enough money. We're not making any money, so we're going to stay open, but we're just not going to maintain the manufacturing plant. And that's when things start to go pretty quick.
Yeah.
You get rodent issues, you get bug issues, it's numerous. And the things that we see, as the title of this show, things that make you go, we don't have enough time to tell you how many things I've seen. And nor do you. Because you're in the back of the house also. You see it as well as I do. The things that make us go,
Oh, boy. Yes. It is somewhat alarming when you go into a second or third gen restaurant that's been closed and you start looking at how it was maintained, and it wasn't. And I just can't even tell you some of the things that I've seen. And I'm sure you have multiple stories compared to what I've seen, but it's horrifying. Sometimes it's just downright horrifying. And that they actually prepared food in that kind of a setting is
in that space. Yeah.
Yeah.
And it makes you wonder. So, one thing about, let's just the roach topic. I would venture to say majority every restaurant has some type of roach because of the process on how they get there. The restaurant doesn't necessarily have them, but when a supplier loads a skid on their truck in a facility that is roach infested, I can assure you that there's roaches that get into the skid. So when that skid is delivered to the restaurant, they've brought their chairs and umbrella and they set up shop. And
they travel.
They travel and they travel well. And I've done restaurant renovations on second, third generation space. The building was built out of cement block. So the cavities are, and every one of them was cavities, which is filled with roaches. It took six complete, evacuate the building, and it was fumigated over 6 times over a 90-day period.
Wow. Can you get those inspections done before you sign the lease? Just to see how bad it is?
But see, that's the thing when you say, oh, wow, I got a heck of a deal on a second-gen space or a third-gen space. Well, You have no clue the deal you just got. Now, I will tell you, that is not always the case. I looked at a second-gen space today, actually two. One fell in with the roach infested. The other was probably, if I had to guess, by looking at it, probably a $9 million build-out. Was open a year.
Wow.
It's still brand new. Everything's still brand new.
Pristine.
Clean. It was clean, well taken care of. You could tell it was well taken care of. It's been shut down for probably over a year. The restrooms were very clean for it being shut down. So when you get into that kind of second-gen space, and they're rare. To walk in and get an $8 million restaurant, all the equipment's there, all the bar equipment, all the kitchen equipment, everything is there. Furniture's there, tables, chairs, everything. When they got locked out, they got locked out, but everything stayed. So there's not much to do there other than change it enough to where people don't deem the new restaurant the new restaurant opened in the blah, blah, blah space. If you don't change it enough, that's what you get tagged as.
The same.
Exactly.
Right.
You have to, it has to be a substantial change in the look.
In the look, right. Last week I went to see I think it's the largest freestanding restaurant we have in Laguna Beach. It's been on the market. So a gentleman came over from Hong Kong, bought the building at around 11 million, and then put several $1 million into it over several years because he had permitting issues, he had parking issues, he had all kinds of things that he had to deal with. He wanted to put a roof up top. So of course that adds more to anything. In Laguna Beach, it adds a lot because we have a lot of local residents. And so he put something like, from what was rumored and what I've heard with talking with the brokers and such, well over 6 to 7 million into building out the interior once he'd built the restaurant. And they closed about a year ago. And I went in and just did a tour with the broker the other day. And it's pristine. It's absolutely pristine. I mean, that kitchen, I would eat off the floor of that kitchen. Well, maybe not eat off the floor of the kitchen, but I got to tell you, man, it was clean. And this isn't from the broker making efforts. It's because they left it pristine when they closed the doors. And that is a very rare situation. I was thinking when you were talking about the rodent infestation, one of our great restaurant guys in town here opened up old restaurant here in town called Tortilla Flats. And it had been closed for about 7 years. And it had been in pretty bad shape when it closed. And he would tell me stories of how, they would, take out sheetrock and stuff like that. And they would find, full snake nests and rat nests. And in between the 2x4s. And so it took him just so many months just to clear that all out before he could really restart. And he got everything pristine again. Everything was beautiful. And he was dealing with a restaurant next door that had an infestation of rats. And he was really vigilant about drawing the line in the sand between them so that he could keep his restaurant vermin free. And when that other restaurant closed, they closed it and they fumigated it. And the day they fumigated it was in the middle of the day. All of the rats just fled from that building and went directly into his.
Amazing.
Like climbing over the walls, like half walls where the diners were sitting, they were like coming up and over the walls. He said it was horrifying. He said it was like a horror movie. And
during service. And after everything he'd done to be so vigilant about, disallowing this. Now, fortunately, there's a new restaurant in that space and those people are pristine. And so they've managed between the two of them to really corral the situation. And, he was quick to take action. And that's another thing that happens is when you have these kinds of things begin,
you say, well, we don't really have enough money for that, or this is just a minor thing. And so you just kind of let it go. And that's when it just exponentially goes bad in a matter of very, very short time frame. You know, you can't let these things get out of control in any kind of maintenance situation, especially in the kitchen. Ugh.
Well, I can tell you a good rule of thumb is if you wait till you open, it's 25 times harder to fix anything once you open. Because it costs you the repair and it also costs you the loss of revenue.
Right, exactly.
Okay, like kitchen floors. You know, that's one of the worst things because, well, I use a rubber product. It's welded together, and when the floor is done, it's one floor, and the rubber rolls up the wall, and there's no seam between the tile and the wall. But, you know, typically if it's 6x6 quarry tile, the floor leaks water because the grout joints crack like 72 hours after you lay it because all cement has a shrink factor. So when you grout the tile doesn't move, but the grout shrinks. So you already, 3 days into a brand new restaurant, you already have a water issue that you have no clue you have.
Interesting, yeah.
Just because of the product.
So you're saying it seeps actually into the walls.
Correct. So,
right.
You know, if you think about a restaurant that's had the same quarry tile floor in the back of the house for 10 years, I can tell you there's plenty of damage that's been done from that water seepage that nobody has a clue.
All the way into the walls.
All the way into the walls. Because what happens is where the baseboard and the tile meet, there's a joint right there. And then right behind it is the sheetrock. Well, you know, I allow 1.5 inches. I don't let the sheetrock touch the slab in the kitchen. I let it 1.5 inches up. But a lot of non-experienced guys put the sheetrock all the way to the floor. So when that water gets in there, the sheetrock is a wick, and it starts wicking water. Right. And it's fed every day. Every time that floor is washed, and sometimes the studs are metal, sometimes they're wood. But water to wood or metal with the chemicals, whatever cleaning chemical are that they're using, it just destroys everything.
Well, and speaking of water and rust, I remember you talking about a mixer stand when you were walking with a client in second or third generation. What was that story?
Second gen space.
You're actually touring with the restaurant
I'm
owner
touring,
or potential.
Yes. And she's, okay, and the equipment, it was a 22-year-old restaurant that she bought. Okay, and so, you know, they brought me on board, and I'm walking through it, and I said, well, when you can have all this equipment all out of here? So, do you want me to handle that, or is that something you're going to do? Oh, no, we're going to use everything that's here. And I looked at her and I said, well, the base of that mixer, it's rusted away. It was like leaning like 5 inches because the whole left side it was rusted away. Oh, no, she said, you know, I got a guy that can put something there and patch it. And it's, you know,
who's got a guy who's got a sister.
Exactly. You know, okay. So things that make you go, it's like there wasn't a piece of equipment in there that was salvageable. I can't begin, you know, the way they had the grates on the charbroiler because it was wore out. And, you know, somebody had brought bricks because that was all the flange that holds the grill and was gone. And they had bricks. It was crafty what they did, but it wasn't manufactured that way. It wasn't you know, how do you keep it clean? And how do you, things that make you go, huh? And finally, after probably 5 different kitchen companies looked at what was there and and salvage companies. She had 3 salvage companies come look, and the salvage companies told her, there's nothing here that we would take. It's all junk. Just get a dumpster and put it in a dumpster.
Well, did she listen finally?
Finally, she did, because, I was in one of the conversations, and she said, well, I had my chef walk through it before we bought it, and he said everything was fine. I said, well, you know what? He needs to go with the equipment. You need to get rid of him and the equipment.
So you were saying, a lot of, I don't even know how some of these places pass inspection, because when they have those surprise inspections or whatever those are, fire inspections, health inspections, whatever.
Health inspections.
And they have to have a fire inspection every year, right?
Yes.
Yes. Okay. So you were talking about a fire. Okay. I want you to explain it to people, but I don't even know how they pass these inspections when they do these, they do these
Okay. So let's
things.
just talk about a fire inspection. So, every restaurant that has an exhaust hood, there's a fire suppression system that's built into it, and it's completely automatic. Well, I say it's automatic. If the temperature, there's cables in behind there's removable filters that you take out every day and clean. Behind that is a sensor cable that has springs that it depends on the hood rating, but typically those springs melt at 360 degrees. If it gets above 360 degrees under the hood, those springs melt, and when they melt, they trigger the fire suppression. And when the fire suppression goes off, it's either a green slime or a white powder, and it is a mess to clean up. I've seen where the Ansel system has gone off, and typically you have to have a reinspection for the system to be approved to function again. This group decided to value engineer that process. And they got somebody in the staff. When you pull the reset cable, there's a little loop on it. They took an ice pick and put the ice pick through the loop, which then opens the gas valve and lets the gas come back on. Because one of the things that happens when the fire suppression goes off, it automatically shuts the gas off. It automatically shuts the electric off to the appliances. It shuts off the makeup air, but it continues to run the exhaust fan to pull the smoke and the Ansel dust out of the building.
Yeah, it's a pretty, and talk about crafty. That's a pretty crafty system to have in place.
A lot of restaurant owners will say, well, these engineers, they just think of stuff. Well, let me tell you something, honey. We need engineers a lot more than you think we do. There's nothing that you touch in any given day that hasn't been engineered. Everything we touch, everything we use has been engineered to a degree.
Right. Well, and so when the fire system goes off, in many cases, in some cases, I would assume they can tamp everything down before the fire trucks get called and haul in to really take care of a kitchen fire.
Well, but here's what you need to understand. Here's what you need to understand. Well, but here's what you need to understand. Just because the Ansel system went off under the hood, that doesn't necessarily mean the fire trucks are coming, because there's another additional feature. If the building itself, it depends on the building type. We know the occupancy is A2, but the building type, what determines whether the entire building has a fire sprinkler system, an automatic fire sprinkler system. If it has an automatic fire sprinkler system, then there's a monitor in that restaurant that monitors what happens with that hood. Now, if the Ansel system goes off, the monitoring system automatically alarms the fire department. And the fire department has a set of plans to that restaurant. They know exactly where the gas shutoffs are. They know exactly where everything's at. But
Oh, that's amazing.
if the building doesn't have an automatic sprinkler, if it's a 3,500 square foot restaurant, chance of it having an automatic sprinkler system are probably none.
Or old, if it's an old restaurant.
But the thing of it is, there's no guarantee that if the Ansel system goes off, nobody was ever notified.
Right. And so they just jury-rigged it to make it work. To make their gas work so they could continue
things
to
to make you go, huh? Yeah, they cleaned up the mess, and trust me, it's a mess to see.
Right.
And, rig the gas valve so it's open, and it's business as usual the next day. But now they have no fire suppression system.
Exactly.
Because the loop they haven't called a professional to come back and reconnect all the loop and replace the pieces that had melted that originally triggered the system to go off.
Mm-hmm. And is that in thousands, tens of thousands? I mean, how much does it cost to have that reworked? I know it depends on the amount of damage, but
it depends on how big the system is, because we try to keep, like, the front, the expo line and the prep line, that's a hood in the front and a hood in the back. We try to keep two separate systems, but a lot of times those two systems are linked. So if there's a fire in the front hood, the back hood system goes off too.
Wow. Well,
yeah.
Makes
so
sense.
It's double the cleanup. Yeah. And, it's an automatic shutdown of the restaurant there, because it's not something that can be cleaned up in 30 minutes. Trust me, it's a lot of work.
It's a mess. I've seen it once.
Yes.
And as you were saying, when fire inspection comes in and does their inspection every year, they replace that whole green slime or powder with air.
Correct.
So that they can test it without.
Correct. So, right. When they do their annual fire inspection, they have to certify the hood every year. So what they do is they pull the tanks that have the fire suppression product in it, and they replace that tank with air. And then they put little caps on the nozzles, the spray nozzles, and they go through the process. They turn the burners on so they have some kind of flame, and they pull the trigger that actuates the system, and the little caps blow the air. The gas goes off. The lights go off on the hood. The makeup air goes off, and the fan continues to run. That's what the fire marshal is there to do. And if that all passes, then he hangs a little tag on the gas valve of the hood. The next thing he does is certify the fire extinguishers.
Right.
So there's what they call a K fire extinguisher that is closest to the kitchen. Mm-hmm. And then the B size is the ones that are out in the dining room, typically by the front door or wherever there's an exit door, there should be a fire extinguisher.
Right. Exactly. Yeah, true. Okay, so now we've just talked about fire. We were also talking about, you were talking about floors earlier, and you've been in situations where you've seen them spray foam on the floor between the baseboard and the floor because they're ending up with this rot and this issue that's happening, right?
Well, and I just seen it today in one of the second gen spaces where the tile base in the kitchen was, you could see the rot in the wall and the FRP. So there's nothing to caulk through. There's no way you can caulk that and seal it to keep bugs out. So the next trick is the spray foam. So you stick the nozzle of spray foam down in that gap, and they pull the trigger, and when the foam comes out, then it seals it, and the health inspector will pass that. Because they've achieved, it doesn't, in essence, the code does say what kind of product you need to seal with, but I can tell you that majority of the health inspectors that see a 1-inch gap and see it filled with foam, they're happy with that because at least the gap is sealed.
Right. But I mean,
and then health inspector is going to be there another 90 days anyway. So, it goes into their report.
Right. But when you look at something like that and you have somebody who's looking at getting into the property, I mean, the thing that you would be recommending is we got to take out all the floor. And we also have to test the walls.
Tear the walls
and we
up too.
also may have to actually tear the walls out and put sheetrock in, brand new sheetrock in, and then put in a new floor. And a lot of people aren't even considering that.
They don't even consider that. So here's the big thing. Restaurateurs listen to this very closely because that's probably one of the most important things that's overlooked. When you sign a lease, it's typically a 7 to 10 year lease. It's a 7 to 10 year lease and a capital expenditure that you're going to be in business there.
Mm-hmm.
If something is falling apart on your walkthrough and you don't have the capital to replace it and repair it properly, I can tell you right now, you're not making it at that you're not making it in the restaurant business at that location. Because it is 20 times cheaper to fix something before you open than it is after you open. Because when you open, it's the cost of the repair times paying people to stand around, plus the revenue loss that you have because you're going to have to close if it's that serious.
Mm-hmm.
So something that would have cost $1,000 a fix and maybe a 6-hour fix now costs you an entire week, and it's a $6,000 item. Think hard about your capital expenditure. Maintenance and repair on your balance sheet is a completely different line item than a capital expenditure.
Very well put. Okay, so let's talk about maintenance and repair on the thing that you saw the other day where it was an Indian restaurant that was doing a charcoal in a saute pan?
This is one of the big things that make you go home. So it was an ongoing restaurant
So they were actually in business doing their thing.
They're in business. People in the dining room, people working in the kitchen. And I had a client that was looking at the space because that particular restaurant was going to close in 120 days. Mm-hmm. Okay, I went in the back of the house, and so you have to know a little bit about the restaurant industry. A chafing dish is, everybody's seen it, when you go to a banquet facility and you see the big pans with the green beans or the corn they had one of those pans. Now they didn't have room for it under the hood. So they took one of those pans and it was filled with charcoal. Mm-hmm. Okay, that was lit. And they had it sitting on a table next to the 6-burner outside the hood. Then they took another chafing pan, and this is a true story. They took another chafing pan and hung it with coat hangers about 12 inches, 16 inches away from the charcoal. And then I think it's a number 10 can. They're about 8 inches in diameter. Cans that the restaurants get.
Tomatoes and
tomatoes and all that. Okay. So the can opener, they took the top and the bottom out of the can, then they cut slits and they put these cans together and made a duct that went to the hood. I mean, it just stood there and it's like, there's some crafty minds out there, let me tell you.
Yeah, crafty.
I mean, and if the fire marshal seen that, he would.
They'd be closed in less than 120 days.
He would have called the cops and have him handcuffed.
Yeah.
Things that make you go home.
Yes, indeed. Things that make you go home. Well, folks, I think that you've gotten the idea in this episode that it is so much more important to address the issues on the front end before you have an operating restaurant in play, and that it's much less expensive to do it on many fronts as well. Yes. And I think that just those few stories are plenty to keep these people thinking of when they go into a second or third gen, inspection.
Yes, second and third gen spaces are, you're really messing with a wildfire. Trust me, because
Right.
I would tell you that 80% of the second or gen spaces are you're not getting the value you're thinking you're getting. Number one, the equipment's used. It's been used. More than likely, if I had a guess, 85% of the time it hasn't been maintained properly. Okay, 80% of the time the hood exhaust system and ductwork hadn't been cleaned properly. Has the grease trap been taken care of? We don't know. Who knows?
Mm-hmm.
So when you start looking and thinking that you're getting value, here's the next spin. Well, if it's open more than 5 years, there's things in that restaurant that are not in code now because the codes have changed. So don't think whoever your buddy told you, well, you can just go to the city and get a change of name CO. Let me tell you, in order to get a certificate of occupancy, the building inspector, the electrical inspector, the mechanical inspector, and the plumbing inspector, and the fire marshal all need to come before you get a certificate of occupancy. So
there's no way around that. I mean, I'm thinking about a restaurant situation here in town where the owner shut down and another owner took over. And it was like a couple of weeks later, they're open. And, they didn't change the concept or anything. And I'm thinking, how could they have gotten past all of that? But with just a transfer of ownership?
Well,
can they bypass
but he
all
still
of that?
had the
Because
inspections
there's no way.
Well, but if he passed all the inspections, he would get a CO.
I just can't even
That
imagine passing all the
doesn't mean
inspections in
that
place.
everything was up. That doesn't mean that there's a fine line between what gets grandfathered and what's not in code. So fire and safety codes are never grandfathered.
Mm-hmm.
The National Electric Code does not let you grandfather anything anymore. If it's not in code, it has to be torn out and brought up to code. So one of the big expenses in third generation space, if it's older, is the electrical service has to be replaced.
Oh, wow.
And sometimes, I've seen many restaurants where engineers have designed the electrical system to have 3 or 4 panel boxes throughout the restaurant. For whatever reason, I have no idea. You can't get away with that now. All the electrical panels have to be in one section of the restaurant. So when the firemen come, they got one breaker that shuts all the power off.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And when you talk about safety, what falls under the safety umbrella? Is that ADA?
ADA, fire safety, fire life and safety. That's the most important. Okay, and then we get into building is the access doors, do the doors open out? What's the occupancy load? If it's less than 50, the door can swing in. If it's more than 50, the door has to swing out. And that goes for every room. And if it's more than 50 occupancy load, and some cities vary, but that's kind of the general rule, the front door has to open out. The restroom doors have to open. It's again, there's so many details to designing and building a restaurant that, there's inspectors that sometimes are boggled.
Yeah, well, I can imagine they've seen a lot, those inspectors.
Yes.
It's interesting. Well, this has certainly been educational, and I'm sorry, but a little bit funny. And I appreciate you sharing some of these stories because, it's like you said, we see behind the lines, and it is just so important to bring somebody who understands the restaurant build and the restaurant operation from stem to stern in an inspection with you when you're looking at these kinds of spaces.
Yes.
Most definitely.
You
rarely come across a 7 million build or a 9 million build that is pristine.
Pristine, correct. This is correct. And, building inspectors, you know, a lot of people have, they give building inspectors a bad rap. All they're doing is following the code book.
Yeah.
And they're our friends. I mean, they do the same thing we do. We're in the same business, and they assure that what we've done at a particular address is done exactly the way it's supposed to be. So when that inspector gives you what we call a green tag or passes inspection, that's kind of an insurance policy.
Yeah.
Because, so here's where it starts. When we do drawings, the electrical, the plumbing, the mechanical, the architecture, everything is sealed with a professional seal.
Mm-hmm.
And that means that person has been educated to do those drawings. And that when it's sealed, that building, when it's done, you turn the switch on, it's going to work. So when you use the professionals properly, and the proper professionals that do this every day, that's your first insurance policy. The second insurance policy is when the building inspector comes and inspects what was engineered. He's expecting, when he inspects, he expects to see that it was done the way it was drawn on the plan. And when he passes that inspection, that means that it was done exactly the way the engineer drew it. That's your second insurance policy. But when you don't have, when you try to VE that process, that's the worst thing you could possibly do, because the most important part of any project is the documents to build that project.
Right. I can't think of anything else to say. I think that's a perfect conclusion, Bruce.
Thank you.
I mean, yes, that is. It's exactly why you go through this process. I mean, you and I were talking the other day, and we'll do this in another episode, about how many inspections you've got to go through in a build process. It's incredible.
Yes.
It's incredible. And most people don't even recognize that that's what takes place. Most people don't even recognize what happens when you submit your first plan to a city and all the steps that you've got to go through to get that permitted, and how many departments are involved.
And
so we'll be talking
that we
about
could
that
have
more.
3 or 4 shows on that, because that's a whole different can of worms when it comes to Bruce. Yeah.
Well, anyway, today we are going to close up this episode. We just wanted to let you folks know that this is, Diane Armitage and Bruce Russo, Mastering Restaurant Revenue. And we'll be back next week with another episode. And we are looking forward to seeing you all come back and return. Please be sure to like, share, subscribe. We'd love to have you share this with your peers. And we will look forward to seeing you next week. Thank you so much, Bruce.
Have a good one. Thank you.
Thank you for joining Bruce and Diane on this journey of mastering restaurant revenue. Please take a moment to like, subscribe, and share your thoughts in the comments below. Your feedback helps them deliver even more of what you want to hear. Until next time, keep refining your approach, stay passionate about your craft, and here's to your restaurant's continued success.